Welcome back to the story of Samuel Blackwood, the man who had it all and lost it all. When we left him, Samuel had touched rock bottom, imprisoned, abandoned, alone with his guilt and shame. But it was precisely in this moment of complete desolation that he found something unexpected, a spark of hope. In the first part of our story, we meet old Johnson, an enigmatic prison laundry clerk who told Samuel about a mysterious fountain capable of cleansing even the deepest stains of the soul. Now, as we continue our journey with Samuel, we will discover the transformative power of this source and witness how a broken man can find redemption in the most unlikely places. Get ready for a story of transformation, forgiveness, and renewal that will touch your heart and, who knows, change your own perspective on the stains we all carry. The fountain, Johnson said as he painstakingly folded a white sheet, is not a physical place you can visit. It's not a pool where you can dip your body in. It's something much deeper and more powerful. It was a Sunday morning, and the laundry room was almost empty. Most of the inmates were in the courtyard, enjoying the rare sunny day after a week of rains in the desert. "Then what is it?" asked Samuel impatiently. Since his epiphany in the courtyard, he had spent every spare moment with Johnson, soaking up the old man's words like a dry sponge soaks up water. Johnson smiled, that enigmatic smile that seemed to contain the wisdom of centuries. The source is the blood of Christ, son. It's the perfect sacrifice that was made for you, for me, for all of us. Samuel frowned. This is metaphorical, right? It's more real than anything you've ever touched, Johnson replied. Think about it. What is the hardest stain to remove in the laundry room? Blood, Samuel replied without hesitation. After months of working there, he knew that the bloodstains were the most persistent. Exactly. And yet, in God's economy, it is the blood that cleanses. The blood of Jesus, shed on the cross, has the power to cleanse even the deepest stains of the human soul. Johnson took the Bible he always carried in the back pocket of his uniform. He opened it to a marked page and read, "Blessed be the fountain of blood, which flows from Calvary. Blessed be the purifying grace, which makes the sinner whole. Blessed be the glory and power, which gives us so wonderful a day. Blessed be his precious name, which has cleansed us today." "That's not in the Bible," Samuel said, confused. "No, it's an old anthem, based on scripture, but written to help us understand this profound truth." Johnson closed the Bible and looked straight into Samuel's eyes. "The question is, do you believe you can be clean? Do you believe that there is forgiveness, even for you?" Samuel looked away. "You don't know what I did, Johnson. It wasn't just the millions I stole. It was the lives I destroyed, the dreams I crushed, the trust I betrayed. Some spots are permanent." Johnson placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Son, I spent 27 years in this prison. Believe me when I say that I've seen stains of all kinds, and I have never, ever seen a stain that the fountain could not clean." 27 years? Samuel looked at the old man in astonishment. "What did you do?" Johnson's eyes drifted apart, as if he were looking into the very distant past. "I took a life, Samuel. In a moment of blind rage, I took the life of another human being." Samuel felt a shiver run down his spine. Kind old Johnson, a murderer? "He was my best friend," Johnson continued, his voice almost a whisper. "I found out that he was having an affair with my wife. I confronted him, we argued, and in a moment of rage, I grabbed a hunting knife. When I realized what I had done, it was too late." Silent tears streamed down Johnson's wrinkled face. "I spent the first 10 years here consumed by hatred. Hate him, hate her, hate myself. It was such a deep stain that I thought it would never come out." "What has changed?" asked Samuel, his voice barely audible. "I found the source," Johnson said simply. "Or rather, the source found me. A prison chaplain gave me a Bible. At first I ignored her, but one night after a particularly terrible nightmare, I began to read, and the words jumped off the page as if they had been written especially for me." Johnson recited from memory. "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red, like crimson. They shall become like wool. Isaiah 1, verse 18. Samuel murmured, surprised to remember. Johnson nodded, a smile lighting up his face. Do you see? You know the words. Now you just have to believe in them. The following week, Johnson invited Samuel to join a Bible study group that met in the prison chapel every Wednesday night. Samuel hesitated at first, but curiosity about Johnson's transformation impelled him to accept. The chapel was a simple space. White walls, wooden pews, a modest cross on the front wall. When Samuel entered, 5 other inmates were already sitting in a circle, Bibles open on their knees. Johnson made the introductions. There was Marcus, Samuel's cellmate, Raul, a former drug trafficker serving 15 years, Derek, convicted of armed robbery, Tony, an accountant who had committed tax fraud, and Michael, the youngest of the group, serving time for drunk driving and causing a fatal accident. Welcome to our little flock, Samuel, Raul said with a warm smile. Johnson told us about you. Samuel sat uncomfortably. What exactly did he tell? Just that you're looking for the source, Michael replied. We all are, in one way or another. The study that night was about the book of Psalms. Johnson read Psalm 51, King David's prayer of repentance after his adultery with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your loving kindness. Blot out my transgressions according to the multitude of thy mercies. Johnson read, Wash me completely from my wickedness, and cleanse me from my sin. As Johnson read, Samuel felt something strange happening inside him. The words written thousands of years ago seemed to describe exactly what he was feeling. The guilt, the shame, the desperate desire for cleanliness. Create in me, O God, a pure heart, and renew in me a right spirit, Johnson continued. Do not cast me out of your presence, and do not withdraw your Holy Spirit from me. When Johnson finished reading, there was a moment of silence in the group. Then, to Samuel's surprise, Michael began to cry. I killed a 16-year-old girl, he said between sobs. He was drunk, driving too fast. She was crossing the street. I didn't even see her until it was too late. Raul put an arm around Michael's shoulders. It's okay, brother. Let it out. How can I ask forgiveness for something like this? Asked Michael, looking at Johnson with red, swollen eyes. How can I expect God to forgive me when even her parents can't forgive me? Johnson looked at Michael with infinite compassion. Son, God's forgiveness does not depend on human forgiveness. Of course, we must seek forgiveness from those we have hurt. But even when that is not possible, God's forgiveness is still available. He looked around the circle. All of us here have done terrible things. Things for which we are deeply ashamed. Things that, if we could, we would do differently. But we cannot change the past. What we can do is allow God to change our future. Samuel felt a lump in his throat. But how? He asked, his voice hoarse. Like simply, do we accept this forgiveness? It seems too easy. Easy? Johnson laughed. But there was no humor in his laughter. There is nothing easy about this, Samuel. Accepting God's forgiveness means facing the truth about ourselves. It means admitting that we are powerless to save ourselves. It means surrendering our pride, our self-sufficiency, our illusion of control. He looked directly at Samuel. And for men like you and me, who have spent our lives building fortresses of self-reliance, this is the hardest thing in the world. 3 months passed. Samuel continued to attend the Bible study group. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something was changing inside him. The bitterness that had taken root in his heart was beginning to dissolve. Anger at himself, at the system, at God, began to give way to a silent acceptance. One night after the study, Johnson handed Samuel an envelope and a pen. What is this? Asked Samuel. It's time for you to start cleaning up some stains, Johnson replied. Write to your daughter. Samuel felt a tightness in his chest. She won't want to hear from me. Maybe not, Johnson agreed. But this isn't about her, at least not yet. It's about you starting the repair process. That night, in his cell, Samuel stared at the blank envelope for hours. What could he say? How could you begin to explain? How could I ask forgiveness for having destroyed her life? Finally, with trembling hands, he began to write. Querida Emily, I don't know if you're going to read this letter, I don't know if Catherine will even give it to you, and honestly, I can't blame her if she doesn't, but I need to write anyway. First, I want to say that I'm sorry, more than words can express. I'm sorry I betrayed your trust. I'm sorry I embarrassed you. I'm sorry I put my greed above your well-being. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't have that right. I just want you to know that despite all my terrible flaws, I love you. I always loved it, and I will always love it, even if we never see each other again. I'm learning things here in prison, things about myself that I never wanted to see. I'm learning that I've spent my whole life chasing the wrong things, valuing the wrong things. Remember those Sunday mornings when we went to church together? I wore my best suit, you wore those dresses you hated, and we pretended to be the perfect family. But it was all a facade. I talked about God, but I didn't know him. He talked about integrity, but he did not practice it. Now, for the first time, I'm beginning to understand what it means to really know God. Not the God of social appearances or business connections, but the God who cares about broken hearts and ruined lives. I don't know what the future holds for me. I will probably spend most of my adult life in this prison. But I want you to know that no matter what, you will always be my beloved daughter. And I will be praying for you every day, that you may find peace and happiness in spite of what I have done. With all my love, Daddy. Samuel reread the letter several times. It wasn't perfect. It didn't explain everything, but it was honest. Perhaps the most honest thing he had ever written. The next day, he delivered the letter to Johnson to be sent. The old man smiled as he picked it up. "It's just the beginning," Johnson said, "but it's a good start." 6 months had passed since Samuel had written the letter to Emily. He received no response, which did not surprise him. But the act of writing the letter had triggered something in him. A floodgate had opened, and now he couldn't stop. He wrote to Michael, his son. He wrote to Catherine. He wrote to his former partners, to the investors he had cheated, to the employees who had lost their jobs when the company collapsed. Letter after letter, confessing, asking for forgiveness, offering any reparation he could make. Few answers came. Some letters were returned unopened. Others received cold and formal responses from lawyers. But Samuel kept writing. As Johnson had said, it wasn't so much about receiving forgiveness as it was about starting the process of reparation. On a Thursday morning, Samuel was called into the visiting room. He was perplexed. He didn't expect any visitors. For a wild moment, he wondered if it could be Catherine, or perhaps one of the children. But when she entered the living room, she saw a middle-aged man whom she did not immediately recognize. The man was bald, with thin-framed glasses and a simple but well-cut suit. "Mr. Blackwood," said the man, extending his hand. "My name is Robert Mercer." The name hit Samuel like a punch in the stomach. Robert Mercer had been one of the biggest investors in his company, a retired college professor who had invested all of his retirement savings, more than $2 million, in Samuel's company, money that had disappeared when the fraud scheme came to light. "Professor Mercer," Samuel said, shaking the man's hand hesitantly. I didn't expect to see him. I got your letter," Mercer said, indicating the chairs. They sat across from each other. "I must say that I was surprised. I didn't expect to hear from you," Samuel swallowed. "I understand. Look, I know that nothing I say can make up for what I did. The money you lost," Mercer raised a hand. "I didn't come here to talk about money, Mr. Blackwood. No, I came because your letter intrigued me. You mentioned that you found God here in prison, who is seeking redemption. I wanted to see for myself if this was true or just another one of his manipulations." The man's frankness caught Samuel off guard. "Fair enough," he said after a moment. "I lied to you before. I lied to many people. I have no right to expect you to believe me now." Mercer studied Samuel's face for a long moment. "You know, I taught psychology for 35 years. I like to think I'm a good judge of character, but you completely fooled me. You seemed so sincere, so passionate about your company, about your vision." "I was passionate," Samuel said quietly, "but not for the vision I shared with you." He was passionate about power, status, money. I used the company as a vehicle for my own greed. Mercer nodded slowly. "What now?" "Now?" Samuel pondered the question. Now I'm trying to understand who I am without all these things. Who is Samuel Blackwood when you take away the money, the power, the status? It's scary to find out that you don't know the answer. A small smile appeared on Mercer's face. That sounds surprisingly honest. I'm trying to be, Samuel said. For the first time in my life, Mercer leaned back in his chair. You know, when I lost that money, I thought my life was over. My wife and I had plans, trips we wanted to take, a beach house we wanted to buy. Suddenly, all of that disappeared. Samuel lowered his head, shame burning in his chest. But something strange happened, Mercer continued. Instead of destroying us, this loss has brought us closer. We had to rediscover what really mattered to us. And we found out that it wasn't the money, or the travel, or the beach house. It was each other. He leaned forward. I'm not saying that what you did was good, or that it didn't cause real harm. But it also forced me to reevaluate my life, my values. And for that, strangely, I'm grateful. Samuel looked at Mercer in amazement. You forgive me? Mercer considered the question. I'm working on it. It's not easy, but I'm trying. And I think that's what matters in the end, that we are trying. When the visit ended and Samuel returned to his cell, he felt differently, lighter somehow, as if a small piece of the burden he was carrying had been lifted. That night, he told Johnson about the visit. See, said the old man with a smile. The fountain is working, one stain at a time, a year after his arrival. In prison, Samuel made a decision. After months of study, reflection, and prayer, he decided to be baptized. The baptism would be performed in the small chapel of the prison with water from a simple basin. The prison chaplain, a kind man named Pastor Green, would conduct the ceremony. Johnson would be his witness. On the morning of the baptism, Samuel woke up before dawn. He knelt beside his narrow bed and prayed, something that had become a daily habit. God, he whispered in the darkness, I don't know if I'm ready for it. I don't know if I will ever be worthy of the sacrifice Jesus made for me, but I'm tired of carrying these stains. I'm ready to be cleaned up, if you accept me. The chapel was full that afternoon. All the members of the Bible study group were there, along with other inmates who had met Samuel throughout the year. Even a few guards attended, curious to witness the transformation of the infamous fraudulent CEO. Samuel was dressed in the standard orange prison uniform, but Johnson had managed to get a clean white sheet for him to wear after baptism, a symbol of the new life that was about to begin. Pastor Green began the service with a reading from Romans 6. Do you not know that as many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death? Therefore, we were buried with him by baptism into death, so that as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, so we also may walk in newness of life. Then he looked at Samuel Blackwood. Have you come today to publicly declare your faith in Jesus Christ as your Savior and Lord? Yes, Samuel replied, his voice firm despite the trembling in his heart. Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he died for your sins and rose again on the third day? Yes, I do. And do you promise, with God's help, to live henceforth as his disciple, following his teachings and obeying his commandments? Samuel hesitated for a moment, conscious of the weight of this promise. Yes, he said finally, with God's help, I promise. Pastor Green smiled. So, based on your confession of faith, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. He took water from the basin and poured it over Samuel's head. The water was cold, but Samuel felt a warmth spreading throughout his body. It was as if, somehow, the water was not only touching his exterior, but penetrating all the way to his soul, washing away the stains that had accumulated over a lifetime of selfishness and greed. When Pastor Green finished, Johnson approached with the white sheet. As he helped Samuel dry off, the old man whispered, "Welcome to the family, son. You're clean now." Samuel looked at Johnson, tears streaming freely down his face. "I feel different." Johnson nodded, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. "It's the source, Samuel, the fountain that cleans." 2 weeks after his baptism, Samuel received a letter. The envelope had a Boston stamp and handwriting that he didn't immediately recognize. With trembling hands, he opened it. "Dear Father," the letter began. Samuel felt his heart stop. It was Emily's. "I received your letter a few months ago. To be honest, I didn't read it right away. Mom gave me the option, and at first I chose not to read it. I was very angry. I still am, in many ways. But something happened last week that made me change my mind. I'm taking a psychology course in college, and we're studying forgiveness and its role in emotional healing. My teacher said something that struck me. Forgiveness is not about releasing the other person. It's about breaking free. So I took his letter from the drawer where I had kept it and finally read it. I cried a lot. For the first time since it all happened, I allowed myself to feel all the pain, all the anger, all the confusion. I'm not going to lie and say that everything is fine now. It is not. What you did caused real damage to our family. Michael still barely talks about you. Mom still has days when she can barely pronounce her name without crying. But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to see you not just as the man who betrayed us, but as a complex human being who made terrible mistakes. You mentioned in your letter that you are learning about God in a new way. That interested me. Remember how I always asked questions during those Sunday sermons? Questions you never really answered? Well, I've been asking my own questions lately. I have been going to a Bible study group on campus. It's different from the church we grew up in. More real, somehow. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to visit it. I don't know if our relationship will ever be what it was before. But I'm willing to try to find a new way forward. Take care, Dad. Love, Emily. Samuel read the letter 3 times, tears blurring his vision. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was hope. A small ray of light penetrated the darkness that had enveloped his life for so long. He took the letter to Johnson, who read it silently, a smile slowly spreading across his face. "The fountain is still flowing," the old man said, returning the letter. "Not just in you, but through you, to your daughter." Samuel nodded, unable to speak through the lump in his throat. "You know what that means, don't you?" asked Johnson. Samuel looked at him, confused. "It means it's time for you to start thinking about the future," Johnson said. "What are you going to do when you get out of here?" "This will be more than a decade from now," Samuel said. Johnson shrugged. "Time passes faster than you think. And besides, there's a lot you can do right here." "Like what?" "Well," said Johnson, his eyes shining with that inner light which Samuel had come to associate with the presence of something greater than themselves. "You were a very gifted businessman, weren't you? He only used his talents for the wrong purposes." Samuel discussed this. "Yes, I think so. So how about using those same talents for something good now? Something that can begin to repair some of the damage you've caused." The idea came slowly, like a seed planted by Johnson that gradually took root in Samuel's mind. He still had some assets that hadn't been seized. A small vacation home in the name of a relative, some shares in companies that weren't directly connected to his case. It wasn't much compared to what he had already owned, but it was something. With the help of a pro bono attorney that Pastor Green knew, Samuel established a foundation. He called her The Source, a name that made the other prisoners in the Bible study group smile with understanding. The foundation's goal was simple: to provide financial education and microloan opportunities to ex-offenders. Samuel knew from his own experience in prison that one of the biggest barriers former inmates faced was a lack of economic opportunity. Without work, without income, many returned to crime simply to survive. The A. Fonte Foundation would offer an alternative: training in basic financial skills, small loans to start businesses, mentoring of volunteer entrepreneurs. At first, it was just an idea on paper, but Samuel worked on it tirelessly, writing letters, making phone calls from prison, meeting with the lawyer during visiting hours. Slowly, the idea began to gain traction. An article about the initiative appeared in a small local newspaper. Later, a Christian radio station did a report. Soon, small donations began to arrive. The foundation's first grantee was Michael, the young man in the Bible study group who had killed a teenage girl in a car accident. When he was released after serving his sentence, the fountain granted him a small loan to start a gardening service. 6 months later, Michael returned to prison, not as an inmate, but as a visitor. He brought photos of his new business, a truck with the logo Second Chances Gardening, 2 employees, both former inmates, and a growing list of customers. "I never could have done it without you, Samuel," Michael said, his eyes shining with pride. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." Samuel shook his head. "It wasn't me. It was the source." Michael smiled, understanding. "Yes, the source. It keeps flowing, doesn't it?" 3 years have passed. The A. Fonte Foundation has grown beyond Samuel's most optimistic expectations. What had started as a small charity project now helped dozens of former inmates each year, with an impressive success rate. Less than 10% of the foundation's beneficiaries relapsed into crime, far below the national average. Samuel continued to run the foundation from inside the prison with the help of a small outside team. His work had caught the attention of the national media, and articles about the fallen CEO who found redemption began appearing in magazines and news websites. But for Samuel, the real success was not in the numbers or in the publicity. He was in the transformed lives, in the letters he received from former inmates who now had stable jobs, who could support their families, who had regained their dignity. On a Saturday morning, Samuel was called into the visiting room. He didn't expect any visitors that day and wondered if it was another journalist wanting an interview. When he entered the room, his heart almost stopped. Sitting at a table in the corner was Emily, no longer the teenager he remembered, but a young woman of 21. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, and she wore glasses now, glasses that made her look surprisingly like Catherine when Samuel met her in college. For a moment, Samuel was paralyzed, unable to move or speak. Then slowly, as in a dream, he walked to the table. "Hi, Dad," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "Emily," he managed to say, his own voice almost a whisper. You came." She nodded, a small nervous smile on her lips. "I came." They sat down, an uncomfortable silence hanging between them. There was so much to say, so many years lost to recover, that neither of them knew where to start. Finally, Emily spoke. "I read about its foundation. Seems incredible." Samuel felt a blush of pride. "It's a start, an attempt to fix some of what I broke." "It's more than that," Emily said. "You're really helping people." Another silence, less uncomfortable this time. "How is your mother?" asked Samuel finally. "She's fine. He got married last year. He is a good man. History teacher." Samuel felt a pang of pain, but also a strange relief. Catherine deserved to be happy. "What about Michael?" "He's in college now. NYU, engineering. It still doesn't say much about you, but..." She hesitated. "He read the article about the foundation as well. He didn't say anything, but I saw that he kept the clipping." Samuel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "As for me," Emily continued, "I'm majoring in psychology this year. I'm thinking about going to graduate school in trauma counseling." "That's wonderful," Samuel said, genuinely proud. "You were always so empathetic, even as a child." Emily smiled, a real smile this time. "Remember when I was 10 years old and insisted on starting that shelter for abandoned animals in our backyard? Mom was furious when she brought home that raccoon with scabies." Samuel laughed, the memory coming back vivid. "She threatened to put us to sleep in the backyard with him." They laughed together, and for a moment, it was as if the years and the heartaches between them had disappeared. But then Emily's face became serious again. "Dad, I didn't come just to talk. I came because, well, I'm doing my thesis on forgiveness and healing, and I realized that I can't write honestly about it without dealing with my own forgiveness issues." She took a deep breath. "I spent a lot of time angry with you. Anger at what you did to our family, at the way you destroyed our lives. But I realized that this anger was destroying me too. It was preventing me from moving forward." Samuel felt tears forming in his eyes. "Emily, I'm sorry. More than words can express." "I know," she said softly, "and that's why I'm here. To say that I forgive you, Dad. Not because you deserve it, or because what you did is okay. It is not. But because I deserve peace, and because despite everything, you're still my father, and I still love you." The words hit Samuel like a wave, breaking the last barrier in his heart. The tears he had held back for so long now flowed freely. "I love you too, Emily," he managed to say between sobs. "I've always loved it. I will always love." Emily reached across the table and took her father's hand. And in that simple touch, the first physical contact between them in years, Samuel felt something he never thought he would feel again. Hope, not just for himself, but for his family, for his future. The fountain kept flowing, washing away the stains, healing the wounds, restoring what was broken. The Arizona sun rose in a spectacle of colors, crimson, orange, and gold, as Samuel Blackwood stood before the gates of the Tucson Federal Penitentiary, a battered backpack slung over one shoulder and a manila envelope containing his release papers in hand. He was 58 now, his completely gray hair cut short, deep lines marking his face tanned by the desert sun. He wore simple khakis, a light blue shirt buttoned up to his neck, and brown leather shoes, clothes sent by Emily for her liberation ceremony, as she had called it. 10 years, 2 months, and 17 days. This was the time Samuel spent behind the concrete walls and barbed wire, paying off his debt to society. A decade that, paradoxically, had been both the most difficult and the most transformative of his life. He took a deep breath, feeling the morning air, open air without the institutional smell of industrial disinfectant and confined bodies that had pervaded his lungs for so long. There was a fragrance of creosote and sage in the air, the characteristic scent of the desert after the morning dew. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to savor the feeling of not having walls around him, of not hearing the metallic noise of doors being locked, of no longer being subject to the constant control of guards and prison regulations. When he opened them again, he saw the small crowd waiting for him a few meters away, gathered around 3 parked vehicles, a black SUV, a silver, minivan, and a blue sedan. His heart raced, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation making his hands tremble slightly. Emily was the first one he saw clearly. His daughter, now a 31-year-old woman, was more beautiful than ever. Her reddish-brown hair, once long like Catherine's, was now cut into an elegant Chanel that framed her face. She wore a simple but elegant dress, and her eyes, the same intense green eyes of her mother, sparkled with suppressed tears. Next to her was a tall, bespectacled man whom Samuel recognized from the photos as David, her husband of 3 years, a professor of literature at Boston University. In Emily's arms was a boy of approximately 2 years old, Noah, the grandson Samuel had met only through photographs and supervised video visits. The boy had his father's dark hair but the green eyes of the Blackwoods, and he looked curiously at the stranger his mother watched so intensely. Next to them was Michael, now 24, almost unrecognizable to Samuel. The scrawny teenager had transformed into a tall, athletic man with broad shoulders and the confident poise that comes not from arrogance, but from hard-won self-acceptance. His hair was darker than Emily's almost black, and he wore a short, neatly trimmed beard. He wore dark jeans and a polo shirt, and his eyes, so similar to Samuel's, revealed a complex mix of emotions. Behind them, Samuel saw faces he had known only in recent years. Jason Reeves, now a 33-year-old man, no longer the scared young man Samuel had championed in the prison yard, but a successful businessman who ran a financial consulting firm that specialized in helping people recover from economic hardship. Marcus, his former cellmate, released 3 years earlier, now working as an accountant at a small firm in Phoenix. Raul, Derek, Tony, and several other former beneficiaries of the Fountain Foundation, whose lives had been transformed by the work Samuel had begun from inside prison. And then, to his complete surprise, Samuel saw Catherine. She stood a little removed from the others, next to a gentle-looking man with gray hair and thin-framed glasses. Robert, her second husband, a history professor at Boston University. Catherine was older, of course, with fine lines around her eyes and silver streaks in her brown hair, but she was still as elegant and graceful as ever. His eyes met Samuel's briefly, and he saw something he had never expected to see again. Not love, certainly, but a quiet acceptance that was, in its own way, equally precious. Samuel took a hesitant step toward the group, then another, feeling strangely vulnerable under the open sky, with no walls to define or contain him. Emily was the first to move, passing Noah into David's arms and running towards his father. She hugged him tightly, and Samuel smelled the scent of his shampoo, something floral and delicate, as silent tears streamed down his face. "Dad," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You're free, Emily," he managed to say, his own voice hoarse. "My girl." They remained like this for a long moment, until Emily pulled away slightly, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. "Come," she said, taking him by the arm. "There are a lot of people wanting to see you." Samuel let himself be guided to the group, where he was greeted with hugs, handshakes, and smiles. Michael, after a moment of hesitation, stepped forward and hugged his father briefly, a stiff but genuine hug. "Hello, Dad," he said formally, as if testing his words. "Michael," Samuel replied, studying his son's face, looking for traces of the boy he had known. You've become an amazing man." Michael gave a small smile, the first Samuel had seen directed at him in more than a decade. "I'm trying," he said simply. Catherine approached last, Robert one step behind her. She did not hug Samuel, but held out her hand, which he took gently. "Samuel," she said, her voice controlled, but not cold. "It's good to see that you're okay." "Catherine," he replied, feeling the weight of all they had shared and lost. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot." She nodded, and Samuel saw in her eyes that she understood, that she knew how much her presence there, after all he had done, was an act of grace that he did not deserve, but for which he would be eternally grateful. "This is Robert," she said, introducing the man next to her. "It's a pleasure at last to meet you, Mr. Blackwood," Robert said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, and his eyes were gentle behind his glasses. "Emily and Michael talk a lot about you. I hope it's not all bad," Samuel said, trying to ease the tension with self-deprecating humor. "Actually," Robert said with a gentle smile, "they talk about the man you've become, not the man you were." The words struck Samuel with unexpected force. "The man you have become." Was it possible, then, that his children saw him not only as the father who had betrayed them, but as someone who had changed, grown, redeemed himself in some way? David approached with Noah in his arms, and Emily picked up her son, turning him over so she could see Samuel. "Noah," she said softly, "this is your grandfather. Remember we talked about it? Remember the photos I showed you?" The boy looked at Samuel with curious green eyes, then smiled sheepishly and hid his face on his mother's shoulder. "He's a little shy around strangers," Emily explained, "but he knows who you are. We tell stories about you." "What kind of stories?" asked Samuel, fearing the answer. "Stories about a man who made mistakes," Emily said, "but who found a way to do good even in the most difficult circumstances. Stories about the Source Foundation and all the people you've helped." Samuel felt a lump in his throat. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Dad," Emily said. "Just come with us. We have a lot to talk about." As the group made its way to the cars, Samuel noticed that someone was missing, someone whose presence he had waited longer than any other. "Johnson?" he asked, looking around. "Couldn't he come?" The group fell silent, and Emily took her father's hand. "Dad," she said softly, "Johnson passed away 2 years ago. I thought you knew." Samuel felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "No," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know. The last letters I received from him were from a rehabilitation center for the elderly in Phoenix. He said he was fine, just tired, in the bones, as he used to say." Emily nodded, shaking her father's hand. "He was. It was peaceful, as far as we know. He just didn't wake up one morning." "He left something for you," Jason said, approaching with a yellowed envelope. "He asked me to keep it until today." Samuel picked up the envelope with trembling hands. It was old and a little crumpled, as if it had been carried for a long time before it was handed to Jason. His name was written on the front, in Johnson's shaky but still elegant handwriting. can I?" asked Samuel, indicating the envelope. "Of course," Emily said. "Let's give you a moment." The group quietly walked away, giving Samuel space as he carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed by time, with Johnson's handwriting filling the page. "Samuel, my son, if you are reading this, it means that you have completed your sentence and are finally free. It also means that I have already left to be with the Lord. Don't be sad for me. I have had a long, and despite my circumstances, a blessed life, especially in the last few years, when I have had the privilege of seeing the source flow through you to so many others. Remember what I told you on our first day together at the laundromat? There is no stain that cannot be removed. It's just a matter of finding the right cleaner. You found that cleaner, Samuel. You've dived into the source, and now you have become a conduit from that source to others. When I entered prison, I thought my life was over, that the murder I committed would be the only thing that would define who I was. But God had other plans. He used my 37 years behind bars to touch countless lives, including his own. And now, look what he has done through you. The Afonte Foundation has already helped more than 500 former inmates to rebuild their lives. You have turned your fall into a ladder for others to climb. You have turned your shame into a testimony of redemption. I know you still carry scars. Samuel, I know there are still days when the guilt seems too heavy to bear, but I want you to know this. You are loved, not just for me, or for your family, or for the people you've helped. You are loved by God, not in spite of your faults, but with them, through them, and sometimes even because of them. Their spots have not completely disappeared. They never disappear in this life, but they were cleansed by the blood of the Lamb, changed from marks of shame into marks of grace. Keep flowing, my son. Keep flowing. There are so many other tainted souls who need to know the source. We will see each other again, in the land where all stains are finally and completely washed away. With undying love, Johnson. Samuel folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket, close to his heart. Tears flowed freely down his face, but he made no effort to hide or wipe them away. They were tears of mourning for the loss of his mentor and friend, but also tears of gratitude for the life Johnson had helped save his own. He looked up at the sky, now a deep blue as the sun rose higher, and whispered, "Thank you, old friend. Rest in peace." As he turned to return to the group, Samuel saw that Emily had quietly approached and was standing a few steps away, watching him with gentle eyes. "He was very important to you, wasn't he?" she asked. Samuel nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, he said, "Johnson found me at rock bottom, Emily, when I had lost everything. You, Michael, your mother, my freedom, my reputation, everything. He showed me that there was still something I couldn't lose, no matter how low I fell." "What?" asked Emily. "The possibility of redemption," Samuel replied. "The possibility that even after everything I had done, there could still be a purpose for my life. There could still be forgiveness. There could still be love." Emily took her father's hand and squeezed it. "He was right," she said simply. They walked back together to the group where Michael was talking to Jason about the Source Foundation's latest initiative, a mentorship program that connected business executives with former inmates interested in entrepreneurship. "Dad," Michael said as Samuel approached, "I was telling Jason that I think we should expand the mentorship program to include technology training. A lot of the guys coming out of prison today don't have the basic digital skills to compete in today's job market." Samuel felt a surge of pride as he heard his son speak with such passion about the foundation he had started. "That's an excellent idea, Michael. Maybe we can talk to some of the tech companies that support the foundation, see if they would be willing to offer training or internships." "I've already started to make some contacts," Michael said with a small smile. "I have a meeting next week with the CTO of Nexus Systems." "Impressive," Samuel said, genuinely admiring his son's initiative. "You seem to have a natural talent for it." "Well," Michael said, a little uncomfortable with the compliment, "I learned from the best, at least the good part." Samuel laughed, a genuine, relaxed sound that surprised even himself. Fair enough. Catherine approached, Robert at her side. Samuel, she said, Emily told us about her plans to move to Boston to be closer to the kids. Samuel nodded. If it's okay with you, he said, aware that his presence in the same city as his ex-wife might be uncomfortable. I found a small apartment near the office of the Fountain Foundation in Cambridge. Nothing fancy, but it's more than fine, Catherine interrupted. In fact, Robert and I would like to invite you to dinner after you're settled in. To start over, in a way. Samuel looked at her in amazement. This was a gesture he had never expected, a generosity he knew he didn't deserve. I'd love to, he managed to say. Robert smiled, putting an arm around Catherine's shoulders. Catherine taught me a lot about forgiveness, he said. It's a process, not an event. It takes time, but it's worth it. Samuel nodded, not trusting his voice to answer. Catherine's forgiveness, even partial, even cautious, was a gift he never thought he would receive. Emily approached, Noah now asleep in her arms. I think we need to go, she said. We have a long way to Phoenix, and from there we will take the flight to Boston tomorrow. Samuel looked around at the assembled group, his family, both blood and chosen, and felt a surge of gratitude so intense that it almost knocked him down. 10 years ago, he had entered prison a broken man, consumed by guilt and shame, convinced that his life was indeed over. Now, he left not restored to his former glory, that Samuel Blackwood had died in his prison cell, but reborn as someone new, someone more humble, kinder, more aware of his faults, but also more aware of the grace that could flow even through broken vessels. Before we go, said Samuel, I would like to say something. The group gathered around him, attentive. 10 years ago, I lost everything because of my own greed and pride. I thought my life was over, but thanks to all of you, to Johnson, who showed me the source, to Emily and Michael, who found in their hearts the ability to forgive, to Catherine, whose grace humbles me, to Jason and everyone else, the Source Foundation has helped. I've found that sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters. He took a deep breath, looking at every face around him. I don't deserve the second chance I'm getting. I don't deserve to have you here today, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it, trying to be a conduit from the source that cleansed me so that others can also be cleansed. Emily, with tears in her eyes, hugged her father with one arm, still holding Noah with the other. Michael, after a moment of hesitation, joined in the embrace. Soon, everyone was gathered in a circle, arms around each other, not just the Blackwood family, but everyone present, united not by blood, but by something deeper, the shared experience of being stained and then cleaned, of having fallen and then risen, of having been lost and then found. As they walked to the cars, Samuel thought of the hymn Johnson loved so much, the one about the fountain of blood flowing from Calvary. The words came to him now, not as a distant song of a religion he had once pretended to practice, but as a living truth he had experienced firsthand. Blessed be the fountain of blood that flows from Calvary. Blessed be the purifying grace which makes the sinner whole. Blessed be the glory and the power that gives us so wonderful a day. Blessed be his precious name, who has cleansed us today. The fountain had cleaned Samuel Blackwood. It had transformed a man stained by sin and greed into an instrument of grace and redemption. And now, as he climbed into the car with his daughter and grandson, ready to begin the next chapter of his life, he made a silent promise. The fountain would continue to flow through him, for everyone who needed cleaning, to everyone who carried stains that seemed impossible to remove. Because there is no stain so deep that the source cannot clean. There is no soul so stained that it cannot become whiter than snow. That is the promise of the source. This is the promise that Samuel Blackwood would live out for the rest of his days. 5 years later, Samuel Blackwood was standing on the podium of a packed auditorium at Harvard University, where he had been invited to speak to a graduating class of business students. At 63, he had a distinctive appearance, with completely white hair and a face marked by lines that spoke of pain, but also of hard-won wisdom. When when I was sitting where you are now, more than 40 years ago," he began, "I was sure I knew exactly what success meant. It was money, it was power, it was recognition, it was building the most valuable company, owning the most impressive house, driving the most expensive car." He paused, looking at the young faces in front of him. Bright, ambitious, full of potential. "And I got all that," he continued. "I built a company valued in billions. I lived in a mansion by the sea. I drove cars that cost more than many people make in a decade. I was on the cover of magazines. I was admired, envied, respected." Another pause. "And then I lost everything, not because of market forces beyond my control, not because of smarter competitors or disruptive technologies. I lost everything because I chose greed over integrity. I chose the shortcut instead of the correct path. I chose the lie instead of the truth." Samuel looked at the front row, where Emily, David, and Noah, now 7, were sitting. Next to them was Michael, who had recently taken over as Director of Operations of the Fountain Foundation, now a national organization with offices in 12 cities. "I spent 10 years in federal prison," Samuel said, his voice steady. "I lost my family, my freedom, my reputation. I hit rock bottom in a way that I hope none of you will ever experience." He smiled then, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "But it was there, in the most unlikely place, that I found something that all my money and power could never buy. I found a source of forgiveness, of redemption, of purpose, a source that could cleanse even the deepest stains of my soul." Samuel took a small object from his pocket, a polished brass button from a prison uniform, which Johnson had given him on his last day in the laundry. "A wise man once said to me, 'There is no stain that cannot be removed. It's just a matter of finding the right cleaner.'" He was talking about industrial detergents in the prison laundry, but he was also talking about something much deeper. Samuel looked again at the graduates, his eyes intense and sincere. "So as you leave here today, with your Harvard degrees and the world at your feet, I ask you to remember this. True success is not measured by the size of your bank account or the power of your office. It is measured by the positive impact you have on the lives around you. It is measured by the integrity with which it conducts its business. It is measured by the love that gives and receives." He took a deep breath, his voice softening. "And if any of you stumble along the way, and believe me, we all stumble, remember the source. Remember that no matter how tarnished you feel, no matter how far you have fallen, there is always a way back. There is always a chance for redemption. There's always a source that can clean even the deepest stains." When Samuel finished his talk, the audience erupted in applause. Many students were standing, some with tears in their eyes. As he stepped down from the podium, Emily met him at the foot of the stairs and hugged him. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," she whispered in his ear. Samuel hugged her back, feeling a gratitude that transcended words. He looked over her shoulder and saw Noah running towards him, arms outstretched, yelling, "Grandpa! Grandpa!" As he took his grandson in his arms, Samuel thought of Johnson and all the others who had helped guide him back from the darkness. He thought of the hundreds of former inmates whose lives had been transformed by the Fonte Foundation. He thought of his own journey from pride to fall and from fall to redemption. The fountain kept flowing, through him, through Michael and Emily, through each life touched by the foundation, through every story shared, every hand outstretched, every heart open. And as Samuel Blackwood held his grandson in his arms in the spring afternoon sun in Cambridge, he knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found the true meaning of success. Not in the goods we accumulate, but in the lives we touch. Not in the power we exercise, but in the service we provide. Not in the stains we hide, but in the stains we allow to be clean. Blessed be the fountain that cleanses. Blessed be the fountain that keeps flowing. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. Isaiah 1:18.